Hello, everybody, and welcome into another Jew and Gentile podcast. I am your host, Chris Katulka, and with me is none other than the Jewish sage himself, and we need the Jewish sage right now for what we're going to be talking about. Mr. Steve Herzig, how are you, sir?
I'm great, Chris. Do you notice what's behind me? We got a brand new addition to our podcast room.
Yes, we actually took something away and added something. So first, let's talk about what we took away.
We took away a shofar, which is usually on the top of a bookcase we have. But I took it home because I'm taking it for the weekend to talk about Rosh Hashanah. We're in the middle of the 10 days of awe between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur.
And that's something that you're doing with your family right now.
Well, I did it last night. That's what I did with the family. I blew the shofar.
And when we talk about your family, you've got kids that live in the area, and they have kids, and you have them all come over, and you talk about Rosh Hashanah and all that.
Which I did.
Did you have honey and
We had apples and honey and challah, mind you.
Okay, good.
The special bread that's actually Sabbath bread, but boy, when you dip it in honey, it's really good. It's really good.
Do the kids like it?
They never had it before, but what I did is to get their interest, instead of saying, normally we use a knife when we cut our bread, but we're passing this whole round loaf around, and you can rip it off as much as you want and dip it into the honey. We want a sweet new year. So I told them, hey, have you ever heard the expression, that's sweet? And they said, yeah, we have. I said, well, that's what we want, a sweet new year. So then I'm taking the shofar to Connecticut. I'll be speaking up in Connecticut, and I'm on the holidays. And
did you show the grandkids the shofar?
Oh, I blew it for them.
You did?
Oh, I blew it.
Did you scare them?
No, did not scare them, but taught them about it, the name, and they should have remembered, but they didn't from last year. But either way,
that's why God has
you
this.
keep doing it year
after
year until they say, it's a shofar.
That's how you know you've won.
That's how you know you've won.
That's right. That's how you know you've done your job.
But so I took the shofar away, but I added something. And why don't you tell our listeners what I added?
Well, it's actually really good because if you watch our podcast on YouTube or Facebook, you can see our podcast room, and you can see normally the top shelf is occupied. The shofar occupies the top shelf, but we've added a. Why don't you get the lady down there, Steve? Steve brought in a special. This is the camera over here.
There we go.
We added a special young Israeli army woman, a woman from the Israeli army.
Woman, yeah.
That's right. And she's, I mean, the thing, I don't even know what it is. It's just an interesting looking doll of an Israeli woman.
It's a reminder that in Israel, male and female are in the IDF. It doesn't matter whether you have a man, a baby boy, or a baby girl, they're going in the army. Although interesting, as I showed you yesterday when I brought it, we have this guy here.
Yeah, right. Why don't you put him down here, too, on the...
This is our Hasidic guy.
I wonder if I can get a better shot here.
What if I hold him?
Yeah, there you go. That's better. Let me see if I can for our... there you go. Yep, that's it. Over here. This camera. Okay. Yes. So there's our two people.
So normally, in most cultures, you have the men going to the army.
Mm-hmm.
But now we have a woman going to the army, and the men are staying home and praying.
That's a Hasidic.
Hasidic.
That's right.
The only ones that are exempt, they're exempt from serving in the IDF because they're praying, at least that's the argument, they pray for the soldiers.
And that's actually a pretty contentious issue in Israeli culture. It's that
very contentious.
Because if you actually study the history of the Orthodox Hasidim in Israel, a lot of them got wiped out by the Holocaust. And I believe Ben Gurion, I think there were only 400 that were in Israel at its, early on before Israel had become a state. And a lot had been murdered in the Holocaust. So to rebuild the Hasidim, the Orthodox community, Ben Gurion gave the permission for them to kind of huddle together and pray, and they didn't have to join the army and all this.
And they have grown, by the way.
Oh, they're a huge army now of people, of very religious Orthodox Jewish people. But their argument is, well, we don't have to go to the army. Even though every other Israeli has to go to the army, we as Israelis, as religious, don't have to go because we're praying for everybody. Oh, and this frustrates.
We're talking about what we'd call regular Orthodox or conservative or Reform or secular. They're all going into the IDF. And Chris, you could go back to the 67 war and Yom Kippur war where they got stoned because they were fighting on Shabbat. You can't fight on Shabbat.
Yeah, the Orthodox were stoning their own people because they were fighting on Shabbat.
That's right. It helps us. We don't like to talk badly about other cultures that aren't ours in America, but it is interesting and gives you a perspective of the kinds of things that Israel faces, and it's just interesting.
Well, you brought the tension to the podcast room, Steve. That's
right.
What it's actually this in this conversation too about how the Orthodox don't go to the army, but the young men and women who aren't Orthodox do. This is actually one of the reasons Benjamin Netanyahu lost his footing as prime minister, because before he was ousted, I think almost a summer ago, more than a summer ago, as prime minister, if you remember, one of the people within the coalition government that he had, he was a secular Russian Jewish man. And he was in his coalition, and he wanted Benjamin Netanyahu to make sure that the Orthodox were going into the army. And Benjamin Netanyahu, part of his coalition was also the Orthodox. So Benjamin Netanyahu had to balance a secular guy that said, I want everyone in the army, and the Orthodox saying, if you put us in the army, we're leaving your party.
He was dead either way.
It was, and that's why they started going into elections all the time. And it actually all kind of stems from, there's a lot of issues, but
that's right. It's a big issue, and we understand, but I thought that was interesting. So we have our female soldier, our Hasidic prayer guy, and it's just a fun way when people come into our podcast room. It's a conversation piece. In fact, tomorrow, Chris, we'll be bringing in some people from the JCRC who will be coming to visit Friends of Israel, and I'm hoping to be able to show them this podcast room.
That'll be great. The JCRC, for our listeners, is the Jewish Community Relations Council here in South Jersey, where we are, outside of Philadelphia. It's a big Jewish community in South Jersey, and the Jewish Community Relations Council has a lot of impact in the Jewish community of Cherry Hill here.
That's right, and we serve in our Encounter group to help them, and making. Primarily putting together baskets or bags for the holidays. So we have our people who come. It's a service to them. We volunteer. We also worked in a Jewish cemetery and cleaned it up, weeded, and did all kinds of things. They look for projects for us, and we're happy to work for free. Why? Because we want to bless Israel. We want to bless the Jewish people. That's what we're supposed to do biblically. And it's interesting the reaction we get. It's taken time, over a long period of time. We had to prove ourselves, and that's only fair because, quite frankly, the Jewish community, not just in South Jersey, everywhere, is kind of skeptical of who are these Christians. In the name of Christ, they've done terrible things, and now what is this? What are they trying to do? Sweeten the pot a little and then stab us in the back? I would defend that attitude, absolutely. But we genuinely love them. We'll prove ourselves no matter how long it takes. And tomorrow's going to be an example of that relationship which we've started and it's been going strong, established over 20 years ago through the work of Elwood McQuaid, demonstrating that Friends of Israel is here to love the Jewish people.
And that's what we're doing. But Steve, it's September 28th.
It is September 28th.
Do you know what, you showed me this, so of course you do, but actually it fits perfect. Do you know what day it is on September 28th?
Yes, I do, Chris, because listening in the radio, I would have not known this, and I don't know how long it's been going on, but we do have a link that we'll send to people who want to verify. I told you I want this verified because I didn't believe it when I was listening on the radio this morning. It is National Ask a Stupid Question Day. I thought this. So the radio people were saying, wait a minute, we ask stupid questions all the time.
Yeah.
So they said, in order to celebrate and Ask a Stupid Question Day, we're going to ask our audience. This is what they said. Call us in and ask us stupid questions. And so we looked, you verified it. You provided the link.
There's a link to the Ask a Stupid Question Day for September 28th. And it doesn't matter if it's past the day or on the day. Hey, if you have a stupid question, you can go to foiequip.org and you'll see a little section on there that says, say shalom. Ask us a stupid question. Please, we're the perfect people for stupid questions.
Easy,
Steve.
because we'll provide the stupid answer.
Hey, listen, we were talking about this stupid questions day, and I've got the Ma Nishtana up, Steve. The 4 questions
That's right.
that are asked during Passover.
Why is this night different from all other nights?
That's right. Why is matzah eaten, Steve, on Passover?
Matzah is eaten because we had to get out quick.
Why is moror eaten?
Bitterness. Bitter time spent. Hey, they should only know the tsuris we had as slaves.
Why do we dip this food twice?
We dip twice. Once in the charoset for bittersweet, and I forgot what the other one was. Why do we dip?
At the moror.
Oh, the moror. Bitterness. And so we get a bittersweet taste.
Okay, and then finally, why are we reclining tonight?
We're reclining because, as Martin Luther King would say, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last. So the head of the Seder will recline and say, we used to stand and have to be at the beck and calling of our taskmasters, but now it's only our wives that... No, that's not true.
Oh, that's a good one, though. We got to save that for the stupid husband day.
That's a stupid husband who will say that.
That's right.
And by the way, I am a stupid husband.
Well, this is the stupid question day. So again, you got a stupid question, write in and we'll give you a stupid answer.
And those 4 questions were not stupid. That you just asked me, because those are significant.
They are significant.
On Passover.
But we were just thinking of questions.
Yeah, we were just thinking of questions.
That's right. I'm sure there are other good stupid ones out there.
Oh, yeah, there are a lot of stupid questions out there.
One of my favorite professors at Dallas Seminary, he was in his 90s when we were going through his class.
Dwight Pentecost.
And, when you get older, I think you get a little more fidgety. You get
Be careful.
Well, you got 20 more years, Steve, so you're good to go. But you know what? You get a little more. I don't know. Things might bug you a little more. And I remember this one nice girl in class asked a question about the kingdom, and he goes, "Well, that's a stupid question." And I thought,
"Oh, that's brutal."
Yeah. And I just thought it's not a stupid, but that's what happened. Look when you're still teaching at 90, those things happen,
He should have bowed out while he had a chance.
With a little more grace.
Yeah.
But anyway, stupid questions are welcome. Go to foiequip.org, go to the Say Shalom section, and give us your question. We'd like to read them.
We would love to hear, Chris, it just thinking about a stupid question. We always say whenever we minister, whenever there's an opportunity at our conferences, that's what people worry about. And so they are inhibited.
I know.
And they won't ask the question. So maybe by us kind of making fun of it, it is National Ask a Stupid Question Day. We honestly, you and I, do not believe anything related to Friends of Israel or the Bible, the Jewish people. We don't believe any question is a stupid question.
Not at all. Please send your questions, whether you think they're good or stupid, and we will be sure to do our best to answer them, foiequip.org. And just a quick reminder that the Jew and Gentile podcast is sponsored by FOI Equip. FOI Equip is your place to learn the Bible from a Jewish perspective. If you want to sign up, you can put your email address down, and you can become a part of our mailing list at foiequip.org.
And you are up, Chris.
I'm up. That's right. On October the 6th, I start a Intertestamental History class, which is just a very stupid way of saying in between the testaments. So if you want to learn what happened in that 400 years between Malachi and Matthew, come on out October 6th, 7:30 p.m.
I think that class is going to be very helpful to people.
I think we've already got almost 400 people signed up for that, registered. We'll do one more push this week for people through our email. So if you signed up, you probably have received an email. But if you haven't signed up for FOI Equip to be on our mailing list, go to foiequip.org.
I got a question for you, Chris.
Yeah.
When we're recording right now, this podcast, it is between not 2 testaments, but between 2 of the main, there's 7 feasts. This is between 5 and 6.
Mm-hmm.
We're recording right now. What's going on right now?
Yeah, so as you said, you just celebrated Rosh Hashanah with your grandkids and your family, and that's fall holiday, the first of the fall holidays that takes place. And then following Rosh Hashanah is Yom Kippur, 10 days later. But in between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are 10 days of awe, which means it's a time of repentance. This is when you kind of take an inventory in life.
Audit. We're doing an audit.
Yeah, it's not a financial audit. It's a spiritual audit, and it's a time that you begin to take a look at your relationships with people, and you ask yourself, did I wrong somebody? And then you go and you ask for forgiveness for wronging them. So it's not just asking God for forgiveness. God's also commanding you to to correct and right the wrongs that you had with others throughout the year. But you're doing this in Jewish culture and Jewish theology. You're doing this so that you can make sure that your name is written in the book of life for the year.
And sealed.
And sealed for the year. That's right.
That's right. And so I can go to you during these next 10 days and say, Chris, that was a stupid question. Why did I ask it of you? I'm sorry.
That's right. Yeah, never a stupid question. All right? Never a stupid question.
That's right.
But that's a big thing, though, is that the difference between how we understand forgiveness and in Jewish culture and theology and how they understand how God forgives, we don't have to wonder if our names are written in the book of life. Because of what Christ did, our Passover lamb, our sacrifice, eternal sacrifice.
Once and for all.
Once and for all. And not only our Passover lamb, but also our Yom Kippur sacrifice. We have confidence that our names, if you believe in him, are written in the Lamb's book of life.
Amen. That's a great truth.
And so with that said, though, until the Lord comes, we all die. We all face that day until the Lord comes, and I hope he comes soon. But until that day, we're going to die. And this is actually an issue. We've kind of taken a hiatus. We took a hiatus
it's been a long time since we've come to this article. We've done 2 parts to it.
That's right.
And now we're coming to the 3rd part.
Just a fresh reminder, we're looking at an article in Health Digest that Steve found on what a woman who kind of does hospice care. She's a doctor in hospice care. And she kind of, through all of the years of all of her experience in these remaining moments of people's lives, have been able to categorize kind of the big regrets that people have just before they die. And Steve, why don't we just do a quick recap? Because I know the first one...
let me read it, Chris. She shares that one of the 3 common regrets most frequently voiced by patients was, number 1, not spending more time with loved ones, including years lost with a loved one due to a trivial disagreement. We talked about
forgiveness with that as well.
That's right. Another common regret was having spent too much time on work rather than dedicating time to themselves or their families.
And do you remember the Yiddish word that we did for that one?
I do not.
Farstunkena.
Oh, farstunkena. Now I do.
I watched it, a couple of days ago, and you said, that farstunkena of a dad, he worked his whole life,
And never spent time with the kids.
That's right.
He's farstunkena.
That's right.
All right. And lastly, and that's what we're going to talk about today, she found that the 3rd most common regret amongst patients was lack of courage to pursue a life true to the innermost self, their passions, their desires, rather than living for other people's expectations. So the idea of actually legacy work, she calls it. And Chris, this was really interesting to me because this was found, she said, among younger patients who were in hospice. So they're young, where most of us expect to live a longer life. Their forecast was pretty dim. And so she talks about the idea of legacy work, where she encourages her patients to, while they have time and are alive, to fill out birthday cards if they have children or brothers or sisters or whatever it is, to leave behind things about themselves, write little poems or a little biography or something to share with them. And at the appropriate time, they can read it and reread it, letters, things like that. So I was thinking of legacy work, not in the sense of what the doctor was telling us, perfectly good advice. But Chris, she's not the originator of legacy work as it relates to Christian life. I think we both found some verses. I'll tell you to go first. From the Apostle Paul. Why don't you read that passage? Because it really has to do with our legacy. What will people think about us when we leave this planet?
Yeah, 1 Corinthians chapter 3, starting in verse 10 says, "By the grace God has given me, I laid a foundation as a wise builder, and someone else is building on it. But each one should build with care. For no one can lay a foundation other than the one that's already laid, which is Jesus Christ. If anyone builds on this foundation using gold, silver, costly stones, wood, hay, or straw, their work will be shown for what it is, because the day will bring it to light. It will be revealed with fire, and fire will test the quality of each person's work. If what has been built survives, the builder will receive a reward. If it is burned up, the builder will suffer loss, but yet will be saved, even though only as one escaping through the flames.
Wow, that really arrests your thinking,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't it? But I've always said I would rather have the gates come down on my back and behind in heaven than have the gates come where I'm first in line, separated from God. And so, yeah, that's a reminder of the things we do as believers. Are they going to stand the test of time? A legacy. What kind of legacy?
And not even stand the test of time, but also stand the test of God's judgment that's coming.
100%.
Because that's what we talk about this a lot in our prophecy conferences that we do, that, when we study biblical prophecy, we're not just studying, what's going to happen in the future. We're also studying the way we should behave as believers today, and not only how we behave as believers today, but also the legacy that we leave behind. Because here, the Apostle Paul is saying what we're building today does matter for that time of judgment in the future, when God's judgment does come, because that's what Paul's saying. His judgment is coming. And look, you could build with gold, and you could build with silver and hay and straw. And if it survives the judgment that's coming, then you know that it was tested by God as something of value. But if it burns, then it's probably something that was built selfishly, with selfish motivations. The legacy that you leave behind can even be burned in some way. And so, how are you building? What are you building? And, what comes to my mind is that you can build all you want, all the things that you can dream of, but I think the thing that stands as you say, the test of time, or the ultimate judgment coming, is the fact that we share the good news of the Lord Jesus. A legacy that we leave behind is that we lived a life that was pleasing to the Lord, but that we also made sure people knew that what we believed matters, and that we can share our faith, and our faith impacts others, but also that they would come to faith, because that's really what can stand the judgment that's coming. So sometimes I think when we think of building, we're thinking of physical buildings that we're building, but a lot of times the type of building I think Paul is talking about is the discipleship that we pour into others, and the spiritual insights that we help give from the scriptures, or directing people to a relationship with the Lord. Those are the things that will stand the test of God's coming judgment, not the buildings and the selfishness and those selfish motivations. So that was interesting to me, a legacy that's left behind.
That's right. And, Chris, as I think of that, Friends of Israel wants to build a godly legacy. And in North American ministry specifically, the things we're talking about, we do it in jest, we do it funny, and try to be communicative and laugh. But when we talk about our courses that you're teaching, intertestamental, when we had Jim Showers on for Equip, when we had Elwood McQuaid on who talked about Zvi, these were ways to encourage the brethren, to instruct them, to encourage them, to help them see the ministry that God raised up and glorify Him. So we hope that's a legacy. But then,
you were just talking about intertestamental history, and what came to my mind is the legacy that Mattathias left behind. And here's a guy we will probably never know him.
That's right.
Outside of this story of Hanukkah, the Hanukkah story, we would never know him at all. But here is a priest from Modi'in, which we probably can't even find on the average person can't find on a map. And everybody else around him, his Jewish counterparts, are all sacrificing unkosher things to an unkosher ruler.
Eating baby backs.
Baby back ribs.
That's right.
They're loving every, well, they're not loving it. I should take that back. But they're just following. And they're building by doing that, just following. But here Mattathias stood up. He said, you know what? If I die doing this, then I'm going to die knowing that I followed the law and I honored God with zeal, and stood up against this goyim, who's making us do ungodly things. And yet he leaves and he won. I mean, he defeated the armies. He ends up dying, but his legacy, think of the legacy that he left behind that we still talk about today. It wasn't a legacy of building a huge empire. It was a legacy of a man who said, I'm passionate about God and his law.
He was willing to die for the cause.
Yeah.
And that is a legacy. You know, Paul writes in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, and starting in verse 9, it says, therefore we make it our aim, whether present or absent, to be well-pleasing to him. That's what we're talking about. For we must all appear, he's talking about believers here, Chris, before the judgment seat of Christ, that each one may receive the things done in the body according to what he has done, whether good or bad. That's your gold or hay.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing, therefore, this, Chris, is arresting. Knowing, therefore, the terror of the Lord, we persuade men. But we are well known to God, and I also trust are well known in your consciousness. So, Chris, he's talking about a time, this is talking to believers. He's writing to the church in Corinth, and he's saying each of us individually will stand before God with either building on your verses, gold and silver, or hay and stubble. And we should be serving out of our love for Christ, out of our love for him, and yielded to the Spirit of God in order to serve him, praying that when we do face him face to face as saved men and women, that he will say, well done, my good and faithful servant.
You know, when we talk about legacy, I think you and I are in two different phases of life when it comes to legacy.
I don't think. I know.
I was being kind.
Yeah. That's not kind.
Oh, it's not?
No, that just reminds me that I'm old.
I don't mean to do that to you. You're not old. That's the thing. I mean, you've got more pep in your step than most 20-year-olds do.
I don't think so. But that's another story.
That's another story. But I will say you have, I'm sure, a different way of thinking about legacy that maybe you had when you were my age. When I'm 40, we won't mention your age, but you have.
Oh no! Advertise the magazine. I just wrote an article.
Oh, that's right.
That's right. You could tell them. I have no problem.
What was it? 70 and
I'm right now entering my 70. That's King James talk for 70. And Chris, this morning we had a birthday that was celebrated by Menno Kalisher. And he's entering his 60. Period.
That's right.
So he's turning 60. He's in the sixes now.
That's right.
And he said this
morning...
morning...
I heard about this birthday.
He said this morning that he's entering his 7th decade. And he is. And so, yeah, there's different stages of life. I interrupted you, which I typically do, so go ahead.
No, and Menno Kalisher is a pastor of a congregation in Israel that partners with Friends of Israel. So that's why, just in case you were wondering who Menno is, but we were hearing from him today about his about what comes with his age.
Oh, boy, his congregation threw him a wingding party.
Oh, did they really?
Oh, yeah, He made a plea. He's telling us. He said, I stood up by the pulpit and made a plea to the Asians in our congregation. Bring me the food. You know who you are. He loves Korean food. He loves Chinese food. He said, bring me the food.
When Menno and Anat, his wife, and kids came a couple years ago, they said, do you know any great Vietnamese places? I said, I know exactly where it is. And they were eating pho with me, which I never thought would ever happen. But to get back on our point here, it's that you and I are thinking probably a little differently about legacy. And, you know, when I sit around the dinner table, I've got my young kids with me, and I'm thinking about them spiritually and how God is leading them and things I'm trying to correct and mold and shape. But when you sit around a dinner table, like what you were doing with the shofar recently on Rosh Hashanah, I'm sure you're thinking differently about grandkids. You've got grandkids around the table. When you think legacy, what do you think? Well,
part of it is culture. That's the human side. I want them to know their background, and I try to do that with Alice, my wife, who's German Swedish, and do that. So tonight we're having them over again. It's like we're feeding them.
Oktoberfest,
but not quite. The Swedish side, Swedish meatballs.
Oh, nice.
So all that is, you have the legacy of the physicality of your generation, your background, the fact we're Jewish, the fact we're Gentile, but we're Christians.
Mm-hmm.
We're Christians. And so you want to leave a legacy that reminds them, that gives them an attachment to their, I'm Zadie and she's Granny, to give them that connection that they'll hopefully remember. Now, they're little. And at what point does a person remember all this? Usually I attribute it to once you hit 12 or 13, you'll probably remember most of the things. But when you're younger, you have flashes. And I'm hoping that, and we hope that, first of all, we live long enough so they'll have more than flashes. But if we don't, then at least they'll have an identity. They'll remember that they did come over. They'll remember the foods we ate. They'll remember the horn that I blew, and they'll remember Hanukkah and all those kinds of things. That's the legacy.
I know that's something that, transcends cultures, but to be remembered is very important in Jewish culture, that you remember the name of those. Not that we're trying to put you in a grave here, but remember
100%.
the name.
My father, I just got sent from the synagogue. When my father died, we obviously buried in a Jewish synagogue, and we have to say Kaddish, which is a prayer that remembers the deceased person. And on the year anniversary of any Jewish person's death, if they're following the custom, we get I still get it in the mail that November 8th, so it comes before November 8th, they send the funeral parlor sends the message out that I'm to say Kaddish for my father. And I remember having a discussion with him, and he said, now that you're a believer, you won't even say Kaddish. And I said, Dad, it really doesn't matter whether I say it or not when you're dead.
This was a long time ago.
A long time ago.
Yeah.
I told him, what matters is I pray for you now. I pray for you every day. And that's the kind of legacy you hope you can have. So.
And for me, I keep thinking about the legacy of my kids that are, in front of me, and, just thinking about where God's going to take them, and, praying that they put their faith and trust in the Lord Jesus. I don't know, I can do the best I can to instill the truth of God's word in their hearts, through the way I act, through the way I live for the Lord, and all those things, and the culture that we have. But I'm always reminded of that passage in Psalms where it talks about that your kid is, or Proverbs, where your kid is like an arrow, and your goal is to aim it. But once you release it, that's when the wind hits. That's when all these things can come. And so, I don't know, that's where my mind goes with legacy, because those are the things, especially even what we do here at Friends of Israel, like this podcast, like you said. I hope the legacy of this podcast is that it's touching people's lives, connecting them to the depth of who God is in some way. And that is what I think we're building. You're building something, and I'm trying to build something, and in our families, in the ministry that we have. But hopefully, when judgment comes, God honors the work that we did.
It's in the Lord's hands.
Yes.
You do the best you can. And, it's true. It drives it home. There are probably people listening here who are thinking of legacy, and maybe they have a few regrets, which the doctor talked about towards the end of life.
Yeah.
And how do I make up for those things? And then you can combine the Rosh Hashanah 10 days of awe. Well, there's 10 days. There's time to make up for it. You can't change certain things, but you can. There's always repentance coming to God, but there's also, you can go back to your family regrets if they're still alive, and go back and say, I blew this.
Yeah.
I did this. So I think it's a sobering thing, isn't it? It's sobering here on earth, and it's even more sobering as believers as we face God. That's why Paul used that word terror, because you think about it, we're facing a holy God. He already saved us, but now we're going to find out how true we were when we were living as believers. Were we all in, or were we partially in? And that's going to be tested. And that's a sobering thought.
I'm glad that you brought that up too, because there's always time to turn back to the Lord. Even if you don't have much time left, there's always time to turn back to the Lord. And, I don't think people like to think of God in the terror sense. It's funny how our culture today has, we can sometimes forget that God is very holy. And there is that side of God's love that is full of, it can be terror, as it
It's
says.
a fearful thing to fall into the hands of an angry God.
That's right. But that's even, where does wisdom and knowledge begins? It begins with the fear of the Lord. And I know people try to couch that word fear in certain ways. I look at it like, I feared my father. I loved my dad. I love my dad, but I feared him. There was one time he, really laid into me when I did something wrong. I never forgot it. He disciplined me. I had a great reverence for who my dad was. But I loved him, but it was a balance. It wasn't just all fun and games. It was, I'm your father, you're my son. And there's that relationship that's there. I think that's the same thing, that relationship that we have with the Lord, is understanding love. The love of God is not just a dreamy love. It actually incorporates fear and understanding of who God is, his holiness, all of these things that should make us fear him.
It's true. It's 100% true. It can be a complicated thing, this legacy stuff. It can be a complicated thing.
Steve, you were saying you can return at any point, and I was doing a radio program on the book of Joel and for the Friends of Israel today, and I found this one great passage in Joel that just stood out to me. God was calling the Jewish people back to him. Judgment was coming. And it says, even now, this is Joel chapter 2, verse 12, even now declares the Lord, return to me with all your heart, with fasting and weeping and mourning. I love this. Tear your hearts, not your garments. Oh, I love that passage.
That's a great line.
Yep. So you think about legacy, it's not just the act of the things that we're doing. It's that God is a personal God who loves us and wants us to build for him, not a kingdom, but build for him a ministry that is impacting the lives of others, discipling others, bringing others to the Lord. Those are the things that will stand the test of God's judgment, not the selfish motives that we have that we want to build often on. So that ends our time, Steve. That was a great find.
Now we got to think of what we're going to do next week.
I know. We'll figure something out. We'll let you know next week what we're going to do. 25 minutes before we get started on the podcast.
That's right.
All right, Steve, why don't we move to the news?
Well, Chris, it's interesting. I got an email from All News, which is Joel Rosenberg, this morning.
All Israel News. Yeah.
I'm sorry. What did I say?
All news.
All.
Not all news, all Israel
all
news.
Israel.
Yes.
I left the keyword stupid. Not a stupid question, a stupid statement.
It's a perfect day for it.
So the headline read, red heifer sacrifice could take place in 1 year in Jerusalem. So I read the article real quick. It was early this morning, and I forwarded it to you and said, let's use it for our podcast. Whereupon you said, what?
I can't open this thing.
What do you mean you can't open it? So I went back, and sure enough, they took it off. And we do not know why they removed this article. Once again,
yeah, it might pop back up at some point. I don't know.
But we wondered if whatever, because red heifer sacrifice. First of all,
but we will say, can I just the link is in the article, but for the Jerusalem Post version of it. So Jerusalem Post also picked up on this, and so I have that linked in our show notes.
And that's that. Yeah. So we couldn't use the All Israel News, but I found it interesting because there are 5 red heifers, Chris, 5 red heifers that have been brought to Israel that right now are kosher, which means they're fit, they're proper, they're A-OK. But they have to wait about 18 months when they reach a certain age where they're adults, and then they'll inspect them. And Chris, if they have more than 3 white hairs on their whole body, and heifers are big, those are big animals, it's not kosher anymore. So they have to wait and find out. But what's interesting, there's a Texas businessman named Byron Stinson, and he was instrumental in locating and helping get 5 red heifers from the United States to Israel. And he told All Israel News that finding the sacrifice-ready cows was not the only objective. Bona Israel, B-O-N-E-H, Israel, the organization Stinson is involved with, has also purchased land on the Mount of Olives that meets the requirements, Chris, for a biblical sacrifice outside of a temple.
That is mind-blowing. So there could, in the next few months, it says a year in your article.
Yes, it does.
That there could be one of the first sacrifices in Jerusalem, in
Chris,
thousands of years.
can you imagine the ruckus if they even attempt it from the Palestinian side? They're going to be saying, oh, they're trying to take over the temple. It's going to be crazy. But that is the headline. Red heifer sacrifice could take place in 1 year in Jerusalem. And that's since 70 AD, Chris.
The heifers were located and brought to Israel, like you said, with the help of Bona Israel organization, which involves both Jewish people and Christians. Brian Stinson, who is the Texas rancher and fundraiser and advisor for the organization, raised the cattle. It also says this: the heifers were greeted by a ceremony at Ben Gurion Airport.
Couldn't you just imagine?
I know all these rabbis came out. I'm not going to read all their names. With Stinson, who's a Christian, and the Jerusalem and Heritage Ministry Director, Nathaniel Isaac. But I want to read this, Steve. This is Stinson, the Christian, the Texas cattleman who's a Christian, said, quote, "I did not set out to do this, but right now I am probably the best red heifer hunter in Texas." Stinson told Israel 365 News. He also went on and he said, "The Bible says to bring a red cow to purify Israel. I may not understand it, but I am just doing what the Bible said." That's interesting. He says this: the prophecies came true and the Jewish people are back in the land back in Israel. Now they need to build a temple, but it's like buying a really nice car. If you don't have a key, you're not going anywhere. The red heifer is the key to making the temple work like it's supposed to.
It's interesting that a Christian is motivated to do this. I just find it interesting. I wonder, first of all, let's say an average Israeli reading that, I think, this is just subjective in my opinion, an average Israeli reads this and goes, "Ay, these Ganefs, these Gentiles, these Goyim, they're driving us crazy. We have to live here, and they're playing with dynamite on the Temple Mount."
Exactly. And that's which it will be, like you said. It will become a serious issue. But it's, you start to wonder, too, a red heifer, kosher, which we're going to talk about that in a moment, but kosher is very important. And would a red heifer be unkosher if it was a Gentile, a goy, who is raising the red heifer?
That, my friend, is a question for the rabbis. I could picture two sides who say, well, if it fulfills Almighty, it might be kosher. And the other guy says, no, it can't be kosher at all. These Gentiles, these goyim, they're unclean. We can't go near them. That red heifer is horrible. We can't do it. It's no, not, and on it goes. They get to argue.
Well, here we go, because in the article it has a Talmud.
We have an answer already.
Non-Jews and the red heifer. This would not be the first time that non-Jews have helped provide a red heifer to the Jewish people.
There you go.
The Talmud, which is a religious book of the laws, interpretations of the laws that the Jewish people follow. Definitely, these are oral laws. This isn't written law like the Torah from the Bible. This is the laws that come during the rabbinical period. It says that the Talmud related that a non-Jew named Dama ben Netina refused to provide gems needed for the temple, despite the offer of a large reward, due to the fact that his father was sleeping on the key to the box holding the gems, and he did not want to disturb his father's rest. This is a very old story, hundreds and hundreds of years old. In reward for the respect he showed for his father, a red heifer was born into Ben Natina's herd the next year, and he was able to sell the temple the heifer for the money he would have earned if he had sold them the gems.
So it was not treif. It was kosher.
That's right. They accepted in the past a red heifer.
So it shall be written. So it shall be done.
So anyway, we'll keep our eyes out on how all this red heifer stuff. I always feel like the red heifer is one of those, impossible things to ever get. It's what, but hey, maybe it's getting closer.
Maybe.
All right, Steve, we've got another news item that we picked out here from Mexico, actually.
Mexico, the Mexican authority raided the Lev Tahor cult compound and detained 26 members. This is coming from the Times of Israel. Chris, what's this all about? What's going on in Mexico? And they actually, there's a picture, and you're going to send the link. They don't even look Jewish. The way they're dressed, they almost look like Muslims.
Yeah, this is a Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox Hasidic group that is a very extreme to the point where they follow extreme laws. There's about, I think, 350 of them. They started off, I believe, in Israel, and then they made their way down. Let me see here. We have it was an extremist ultra-Orthodox sect that was founded by Rabbi Shlomo Hellbrands in Jerusalem in the 1980s. They left Israel. They went to Canada then, from Canada to Guatemala in 2014, and they were kicked out of Canada because of child abuse and early child marriage. And so this group made their way down to Guatemala, and I'm guessing they made their way up into Mexico, and there the Mexicans have essentially round them up, and they could face charges for up to 20 years for sexual charges and early child marriage, all of these things. So what's interesting, it's an extremist Jewish group, this Lev Tahor group. This one particular man escaped. Steve, he escaped. Yep. He calls it a cult. It was a Jewish man who escaped back to Israel, but he had a son during that time, and the Jewish group kept the son. And so when the authorities came in and arrested them, that 3-year-old boy, his son, was returned to Israel with him.
He flew back to Israel, and he said, "I knew there was no chance I would leave him to live a life of cruel laws, mind control, hunger, and misery. My dreams came true on Rosh Hashanah," he said, referring to the Jewish New Year when his son was reunited with him. It's kind of sad to have those kind of accusations and to lifestyle, and which is contrary to the scriptures. It's just very, very upsetting. But nonetheless, they provided kosher food for them.
In prison.
In prison.
They have kosher food.
They got kosher. Right. That's what the article says.
You're locked up for good, but here's your kosher food.
Here's your kosher food.
Let's talk about another thing that this group enlightens us to, is that there are, and they're here in the United States too. It's not this Lev Tahor group, but there are other ultra-Orthodox groups that are actually anti-Israel. And this was a ultra-Orthodox group that was, I know this is kind of probably making our listeners' heads spin. So wait, how do you have an ultra-Orthodox group that's anti-Israel, anti-Zionist? Well, I believe there's a group of them here in the United States. And in fact, they have shown allegiance to, at least this group, Lev Tahor, to the Ayatollah Khomeini in Iran, because they're so anti-Israel. But they're anti-Israel for a reason that is actually what they think is more biblical.
That's right, Chris. They believe that only the Messiah can bring his people back to the land and usher in the kingdom where there will be peace forever. And instead, we have an Israel that they would say is it's all false pretense, because the Messiah didn't make it happen. It was done by men who were not even religious Jews, men and women who were secular, and some who didn't even believe in God, gave no acknowledgement at all to God. And when you look at Ezekiel 37, there's actually a reason to kind of justify that, because in Ezekiel 37, the dry bones prophecy, we're told that the bones come together. These bones are the whole house of Israel, we're told. They come together and they stand, they're all reassembled. Those dry, parched bones are reassembled, put all the skin put back on, everything except God's breathing into them. Mm-hmm. So what they're saying, it's unjustified. They're saying this, unjustified to have Israel unless Messiah does it. We don't believe that, you and I. Mm-hmm. We believe that God is accomplishing his purpose, but at this point in the game, so to speak, Israel is standing, and there is Israel. It's a country. It's a miracle. It's a miracle in the Middle East. But as a nation, they are in unbelief. God's breath is not in them. So it's kind of a hybrid of being right and wrong at the same time.
And we actually have history on our side, because if you remember in the Old Testament, Israel was kicked out of the land, and then they came back under Ezra, Nehemiah. several hundred years goes by and Israel isn't living the way they should be living. In fact, they've got issues of, man-made laws, but they also have pagans ruling the land. And who comes in the midst of all that? And God even says, I'm coming at the right time, in the fullness of time. The Lord Jesus, the Messiah, comes to an Israel that was reborn. It wasn't in its perfect state. It was controlled by Herod. It had, like I said, Pharisees and Sadducees. It had all these issues. Jesus came to an Israel then. And so should we expect it to be that only the Messiah can bring Israel back into existence? Well, he's the one who breathes life into them, but God's the one forming them right now as we speak. So
yeah. So this group, it's what's interesting. I think Israel is one of the few countries, if not the only country, that is transparent. There's news it's a free country. And so that means you see all the blemishes, all the troubles, all the stuff that goes with being a people. And the Bible's that way. God, that's our model. God in his word, the living word, teaches us, look, I chose these people and look at them.
Yep.
But it's transparent. We are a sinful people. As a people, we're stiff-necked and hard-hearted, and yet God thought we were special.
Mm-hmm.
For whatever reason, it's in his sovereignty, and he chose us. Just like as believers, Chris, you and I are chosen before the foundation of the earth. While we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. What an amazing truth.
It's true. Steve, what do you think would have happened if they were on the Guatemala-Mexican border? What do you think would have happened if they were on the Mexican-United States border?
I have no idea.
They would have walked right on in, No problem whatsoever.
Probably, and that's of course the political side of us.
That's
here.
right. Well, we don't have. It's just we can laugh at it a little bit. But anyway, that's just a little bit of news of what's going on in Israel and the Jewish world. But Steve, we've got a fun Yiddish word. I'm sure a Yiddish word that it's actually more of a Hebrew word we talked about as a Hebrew word.
It is more of a Hebrew word, but because of the 5 red heifers, we decided to talk about the word kosher.
Kosher, that's right. And you know what? It's not just the 5 red heifers. It's the fact that these people in prison are eating kosher.
They're eating kosher food in prison.
That's right.
You know what they say? Just a little insight. If you ever have the opportunity to fly and you know you're going to get food on the airline, they don't ask you any questions. You should order a kosher meal. Because if you order a kosher meal on a flight, the food is fresher.
Really?
And it's hotter. It's made special. There's, on a typical flight, you go and you order kosher food. I know you've seen it before.
Oh, yeah.
And you get served first.
So really?
Just a little insight. Oh, yeah. Every single time. They'll first serve the kosher meals, and those are made special. Those are to order. And then all the Gentiles and all the Jewish people who don't care about that, they plop that stuff in front of you. But the kosher food is better food.
Okay, that's good to know. I didn't know that. I'll do that next time I fly to Israel.
Test it out. Yeah. Order ahead of time.
I'm going in March.
Going in March and just order a kosher meal. Our friends of Israel people will look at you and say, look, what is getting special treatment?
Well, I'll tell them they should have listened to the Jew and Gentile podcast. They would have learned how to order their food for their flight to Israel.
You test it out and see if it's not better.
All right, well, we jumped kind of right in, but kosher is related to specifically food that Jewish people can eat in relationship to food that they can't eat. That there are rules about what they can and can't eat that come from the law, especially from Leviticus. So can you talk a little bit about kosher?
I sure can. What I tell people about the word kosher, it's not a style of cooking. Some people think kosher food, that's a style of cooking. No, you can have kosher business practices. They talk about it all that I've heard Gentiles talking to each other in business.
Yeah, that's not kosher.
You can't do that. That's not kosher.
Yeah.
There's kosher relationships with, you start to date somebody. When is it kosher to not date somebody else? You're dating multiple people. You're in the early stages. Wait a minute. What week is it? The 10th week, the 3rd week, the 4th week? When is it kosher to not when is the right time to stop multiple dating.
Yeah.
Or a woman could turn to her boyfriend, or are you even classified on the third date? Wait, that's not kosher. I thought we've had 2 dates already. Why'd you date that?
Yep,
that other
unkosher.
person? Unkosher, treif. That's a treif relationship.
Yeah, that's unclear. Okay, but kosher means essentially
Fit, proper.
Fit.
It's the right thing. There's rules. There's regulations, and sometimes they're laid out, as in the Bible, but sometimes they're not spoken, and you violate a unspoken law. That's not kosher.
One of the most elementary understanding of kosher is, you don't eat bacon, you don't eat lobster, you don't eat clams, you don't eat things that have pigs in them. That's
all the things meat. That taste real good.
That's right. There's a comedian that me and the kids and my wife like, Jim Gaffigan, and he was talking about how like religion, and he said, there's like the law, could you imagine when God's speaking and he says, you shall not commit murder? Okay, I got that. You shall not commit adultery against your wife. Okay, I got that. You shall not eat bacon. Wait a minute. I don't know if I can do this. But that's a part of, what identified them as being Jewish. But then you think about this red heifer. This red heifer is kosher up until the point it gets more than 3 hairs that are not red on it.
That's correct. It's treif. It's no good.
That's right.
I used to work at a kosher butcher when I was in high school, and a good chunk of the people I delivered meat to were Gentiles. And you say, wait a minute, why is that? So I asked the Gentiles I was delivering to, and they said, are you kidding me? That we don't want what the Jewish people throw away. They open up the cow, and if there's a spot on it, if there's something, give it to the goyim. And so these Gentiles knew that, and they we want the best. We want the best too. Don't just sell it to the goyim. We don't want that.
That's right. Well, you know what? That's because we're learning the tricks of the trade. I'm going to be ordering kosher food on the airplane now. I will know. I will get served first with the freshest food. There you go.
100%.
All right. Well, listen, Steve. I think we've had a great episode today.
I think it's great.
We had we're in our second year now of the Jew and Gentile podcast.
Don't forget.
That's our friends, our new friend.
The praying guy and the soldier who will protect you, who's a woman.
There you go.
Only
I like
in
it.
Israel.
Only in Israel. I like it. Well, thank you so much for being with us on the Jew and Gentile podcast. For more information about FOI Equip, who sponsors the podcast, go to foiequip.org. Hey, sign up for my class that's coming, Intertestamental History, where we study between the Testaments. You can do that by going to foiequip.org. Hey, and ask your stupid questions.
The stupid question of the day.
Stupid questions.
National Day.
foiequip.org. Hey, thanks for being with us on a Jew and Gentile podcast. We'll see you next week.